just me talking. But I think I'm sure all of us are zoomed out. We've looked at a lot of things online, but now that we're actually looking at each other's faces, it might be good to just keep the format where introduce ourselves to one another and then just briefly talk about describe your project, your research, and then I know Tracy's not going to be joining us today because she had a commitment, a teaching commitment. It's too bad. I enjoyed hers, and I really enjoyed. So, are we good with that? You want to just do that?
Yeah, I think that sounds good.
Okay, cool. And then, first off, let's see, Marshall and Bob Lowe. I'm Tom Ashcraft. I work in the School of Art and Design. I'm the head of the MFA program. I work with Jen. We work with each other, and so it's nice to see your faces, and it was really interesting looking and viewing the right. I looked at them, multiple times, your presentations, and all like super informative, like really interesting, and I really applaud the good work that's just being done, right, in general. And so, like I said, we'll start off by introducing ourselves, briefly describing the projects. And then afterwards, I sent out that email with a set of questions just as a starting point for discussion. But, they basically thinking about how your work, your research, and process and the outcomes, so it's like research, process, and outcomes, and where you see overlap. And I have some general questions I can also format, and I'll reiterate that afterwards. But just to begin the session, why don't we just start? We'll go alphabetically, and Jen, you want to?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Jen Gordon. I'm a first-year MFA student in the School of Art and Design. I joined a group last semester. Last semester was my first semester, and joined a group called Live Lab, which is also a course that kind of was born out of Tom's public practice course in art, and I'm really interested in that. I've spent a long time in, kind of working in arts administration and, facilitating public art. And so it's really interesting to me the way that art and the community can work to engage with each other. And Live Lab is a program that definitely leans into experiential learning and the ideas around the Watershed Project, which is what I submitted with our group. And so Watershed was kind of born out of this idea that, much like actual water leads from all kinds of different places into a central location, we were thinking about ways to bring other artists and to have them work with our group and all of our students really to learn from their creative practices and to kind of assimilate those processes that they use in, creation of new work, as well as to find ways to engage with the public in issues around environmental concerns, as well as just community engagement with the arts, which I think is important. So that's kind of what my project is about. And I'll let the next person.
So we'll go alphabetically. Marshall.
Yeah, so where am I starting? It was just an introduction of who I am. And
yeah, like, who are you and just what the heck are you doing?
Well, I'm Marshall Murphy. I'm studying at Western for engineering technology, master's program there. And I actually got my undergrad here as well. So kind of a continuation of just wanting to stay on campus.
It's a beautiful campus.
It is. But the research I'm doing is in an MR damper. Basically, we're making a damper that you can actively control. Well, semi-actively control on a mountain bike to help reduce vibrations you'll see at the seat, or make the rider feel more comfortable while they're riding on the mountain bike going downhill. how I got started with that is I just talked to Dr. Pierce. I'm not an avid mountain biker, but it seemed like an interesting project, so I hopped on board for his continuation.
Oh, that's interesting that you're not a mountain biker.
No, no, I actually have never gone mountain biking.
Oh man, this is
That is
great.
fascinating.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's great.
Curiosity is
Yeah,
what brought
because
me to
air
that
traffic
project.
controllers, they guide airplanes in, but they've never flown them, I suppose. So anyway, that's interesting.
True.
All right, thank you, Marshall. Okay, Pablo.
Okay, so my name is Pablo Valenzuela. I'm also with the College of Engineering and Technology here at Western Carolina. I also got my undergrad from here. And the way I came upon my project was I originally planned on getting a PhD in biomedical engineering later on. And so this was one of the, I guess, more biomedical projects that I was asked about. So basically what my project is about fixing people with muscle weakness in their lower limbs or in their gait cycle. And gait cycle is the way one walks. So basically, you know how you can usually tell, oh, it's that person. Like if you look at them from the back, you can tell it's a certain person because of the way they walk. So everybody has their own way of walking. And what we're trying to do is basically use electrical stimulation, electrical muscle stimulation to basically gain more strength in that muscle, and so they don't, like fall or they don't have a hard time walking. And we're doing that through a neuroprosthesis that is going to be able to predict when they're about to, step off and when do they need the most, when do they need the stimulation to happen in the muscles near the calf, because those muscles we use. So that's what my project is about. Just kind of like a gist of it. But yeah, I quite enjoy it. I think it's a good project to have. It's definitely taught me a lot.
Yeah, it was really interesting to watch. I have some nieces that are twin nieces that have cerebral palsy, and also I've had knee surgery. So when I've had people watch my gait and then make references. So that's been, in terms of just a personal connection to your research, it was pretty fascinating. So I wrote some notes down, and thank you, Oz. So I wrote some notes down and trying to synthesize or just kind of just cast an umbrella or a big blanket over a blanket. Let's call it a net. Cast a net over the projects and see where the overlap was. And so so what's really great about this is that it's the real world impact that's happening, right, in each of your investigative work, and that these threads that I see, and I'm curious if you see them too, and that's where I'd like to kind of have you all kind of create a conversation, and I'll step back and kind of moderate it. But these applied levels of engagement. So there's the environmental investigation and awarenesses. There's technology, different levels of technology being used, an overall outcome or an idea of well-being, right? And then what's the thread that really is interesting to me, it was really kind of surfaced, was awareness of the human condition. So whether it's like Jen, your Live Lab's awareness of what's happening on environmental impact, Marshall, that same, the environmental impact, but then on a recreational sort of well-being, using technology to improve the way, recreational vehicles, bicycles are used, mountain biking, but who knows what kind of applications that might have. It might have like, first aid responder applications, who knows, in certain kinds of terrains. And then, Pablo, just sort of a real kind of well-being awareness of like people might have either like minimal impact disability to severe impact disability, and so there's this link that happens. And then I'm curious how, like, in the 3 questions I sent out in the email was like, how do you see maybe collaboration in the role of your project-based research and learning? Or like maybe how does creativity, play a role in chance in your work? And then if there are other, like, do you see these types of overlaps in the research projects? And if so, great. Or if not, do you see any at all? And I guess, those three things: collaboration, creativity and chance, and like what kind of overlap and outcome do you see? And I guess what I'd like to do is maybe just start off, if somebody wants to jump in and say something, or we can start off alphabetically and
I was going to jump in actually and
jump in, Jan.
talk a little bit about the idea of kind of cross-disciplinary collaboration. And I think that, the more we develop, in our approaches to looking at things, whatever they may be, I think the idea of having conversations amongst several different, practices and fields is essential to answer whatever questions come up. So I know that in our research in Live Lab and working with the idea of no new plastics, there's, a machine that's involved. And so we're working with, folks from engineering to figure out how to make, improve that machine and make it function better so that we can recycle plastic instead of making new plastic to make work. And so I love that ability to look cross-disciplinarily at ways we can engage with each other and collaborate to solve problems.
Yeah, I would jump into that as well. Well, like I kind of took a different approach to your questions, kind of, and it was more regarding, your project, Jen, and it was just kind of like, it was regarding like the creativity factor, in my opinion. I think that like, while to be an engineer, you need to be creative to, like problem solve and stuff. I think you need like the ideas to come from somewhere, like with what you're doing with your project, you're trying to bring out other people together to learn from them and see what you can do to the environment.
Yeah.
And at the same time, maybe you can think of an idea, and then once you do that, you need to bring the idea to someone to make it real, like see if it's actually feasible.
Right.
Right. And that's how kind of you're just talking about, like I like how you bring up the fact that trying to make sure your machine, you can waste less plastic, but you still need somebody to come and say, okay, this is what we need to do. And I really like that about all of our projects in general, because that's the same thing I saw in Tracy's as well. How she does her research and getting more people engaged in not only like one certain field, but just kind of a cross correlation of fields, so you have a better understanding of how things work.
Right.
I think yeah.
And they're all interconnected, I feel.
So Pablo, when you're doing your work on movement and whatnot, do you have conversations with people who have impaired movement, or like does that, like, how does your work kind of go outside the research lab and back into the research lab?
So currently there's I haven't necessarily, most of it's kind of theoretical, like research right now. I haven't had the chance to test it on somebody with actual muscle weakness yet, because we wanted to make sure for the device to actually work, on a normal gait cycle. And if it were to do that, then we could program get more data, and then program the device to, work with the person with muscle weakness. So unfortunately, I haven't had the chance to do that yet, but I hope in the future I do. Or the next person working on the project does. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, and I just like the innovation of both of your works, and looking at both of your projects. Just coming from an art perspective, I don't do a lot of like mathematical, analytical. It's all very much like kind of esoteric theoretical brain. And so I love being able to look at somebody's creativity. So Marshall, your project is like, how did you even, especially if you're not a bike rider, how did you come to the idea of creating this, reduced shock situation?
Well, it was a bit of a curiosity, really. Like, there's no innovation without creativity, and that's like the first step in all of this. And creativity and innovation are all tied to curiosity in the end.
Absolutely.
And so that's how I got started on that. Looked at it and said, that looks interesting. I wanna work with that. And then just started doing the math.
Yeah. That's so amazing.
And I love the gear. I love, if you're looking behind, like, behind me and like behind Jen, we're in our studios. And I think one thing we all share is there's a lot of hand making going on. There's a lot of the haptic, whether you're working with Arduinos or you're working with equipment. But there's a lot of like physical application of using your hands. And that was another interesting link. And another thing that became apparent too, and Pablo, you started to kind of veer that way a little bit, was just the impact of the pandemic and what it's had on research in general. It's local to global, and better or worse. I mean, instead of doing this live, we're doing this, face to face. We're doing it live, face to face, little screens, right? But the notion of failure in the process, and how central, I'd like to hear you talk about how the importance of failure is in part of the process. And anybody can just jump in.
Well, failure is a big part of innovation, I'd say.
Yeah.
Without something failing, you're never gonna say this might be able to be improved.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, most of our research is going to probably have a lot of failure as part of our results. And if we don't accept that, then our results look pretty poor, like we didn't do anything. So we just have to embrace it. Like right now, I'm dealing with not being able to go in and do all my research because of COVID, and limiting the face-to-face contact.
Yeah.
And that's affecting my research, and I have to say that, or else people think that I'm not doing anything for these last 2 years.
Right.
And that must be really challenging. I mean, are you limited in the time that you can get into the?
Yes, I'm limited to the time that the professors I'm working with are on campus, which is Dr. Call and Dr. Pierce, and then I'm limited to being 6 feet away from them at all times.
Mm-hmm.
I also have to get into the machine shop to manufacture all the parts for the test setup, the test rig. And in order to do that, I have to go and make sure someone's there. And then I got to stand 6 feet away from them, but help them in the production of my parts by saying, this is what I want, this is what I don't want. So it's a lot of scheduling and postponing and
radically accepting when things don't go the way we want them to.
A lot of stress, and then the acceptance, and then the relief being like, well, I guess I have to deal with it.
Yeah, it is what it is, right? But I think, and this was one of the kind of the themes, is like the idea of pushing through despite these challenges, because there will always be challenges to, completion of lots of things, and continuing to research and be curious and to continue to fail in progressive way is what makes it, that's what keeps us resilient, I think, as humans and minds and people that are just the thread that I found to be common was the idea that we wanted, each of us, the whole objective is to, kind of increase quality of life, right? That's kind of the objective, is to make life better, make it easier, make it less painful, make it easier to walk, make it easier to learn and to have access. And I think that that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think like especially what like last spring when this all started, it was just kind of rough at first because nobody really knew what was going on. Nobody really knew what was happening. So it just kind of, especially if you were making some good progress in a certain project, um, not only did that slow you down because immediately, school was shut down. You couldn't come into the room. We got that email of like, if you need your supplies, please come here and get your supplies, or you won't be able to get them until next semester or something like that.
Yeah.
So, and then you have the summer in that time too, where you're trying to do some research, but at the same time you're going through other things. So they just kind of like put a really big stop at the project. I don't know if that happened to you guys, but if
Oh
you're
yeah.
making forward progress,
Hmm.
yeah, it was just so, coming back fall semester and still being in that same situation, I think it definitely takes a lot to, like, not only, I guess, like mentally, but at the same time, physically, to just kind of like try to keep going and try to keep researching and, maybe staying up late to try to figure a problem out or trying to, figure out
Yeah.
whatever else you need to figure out.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's yeah, it's not been without its challenges, that's for sure. Like I said, like we're saying, locally, individually, to globally.
Yeah.
And I I also know that there's been in my case and other people I know that there have been also kind of wonderful silver linings. Just the ability to rethink and reuse technology. Just like now, we could, the five of us are having a conversation regionally, but it could be easily a global conversation. You could actually really be sitting in San Francisco
Right.
in a helicopter at that position, right? But I think that I think that some of the silver linings, and I'm just curious if any of those silver linings have made their way into current outcomes in your work, ways that you're approaching your work, certain kinds of speculations, or do you see any of those silver linings or adjustments that you've had to make because of real world issues and the way they've played out in your research or made you rethink your research?
I think, for what we've been doing, the one thing that has had a significant impact is this idea of engaging with community. And that has had to take a step back from the work in order to keep everybody safe. Wanting to host a public event or a workshop is more challenging. However, we were able to do that last semester with our visiting artist, Nora Hartlaub, and she was able to present her work through this format. Kind of spent a lot of time really addressing the ideas of how do you work and how do you continue to be creative in this, like how do you pivot from this like real collaborative, like hands-on group activity to we're going to do similar things by ourselves in like an isolated situation. And so that, I think, kind of changed the way in which we were approaching our work. I know for me, I want to be very much hands-on engaged, in person. It is part of, kind of what makes me tick as a person. So learning how to get that from this screen has been helpful, actually, because like you said, you can access folks anywhere through this format, and that's been a revelation, honestly. So
Yeah, I think that being able to, I guess I have two silver linings for me. One of them is being able to, reach people that you really didn't think could be reachable, or like, you always waited for them to come to campus, or, you know, um, to me, like in a different setting, that just rather, you can send them a link and then they can like jump in a chat room with you,
yeah.
and you can exchange ideas for the better, especially. So that was at first it seemed kind of weird and kind of like hard to use. It's like I don't really want to this, but now it's become such a big part of how we communicate. That's very helpful.
Are you finding?
Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just curious. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I was curious if you found, that's interesting. It's like how people adapt to change and, the culture of being bothered, or reaching out. And have you found people more like open to respond to our requests, or I'm just curious.
Yeah, actually, do actually actually before this pandemic, yeah, I have one of my friends who's pretty good at um like non-network, like computer networking, like writing code and stuff like that, which is kind of kind of a big part of my project. And before living, I'm originally from Charleston, so living 5 hours away, it'd be hard to go meet with him and then just come back, but like for him to come up here and then like talk for a little bit and then for him to go back. So he's definitely been more open to just like even just as friends, like just being able to talk and just have a conversation, whether it's through Zoom, FaceTime, whatever it is, whatever the kind of conversation we need to have is. And so I think that's very beneficial, especially because I know once the pandemic started, like I went home, so being able to communicate with my professors through Zoom, it was very helpful. And them being able to explain me things in a way that I would be able to understand, and show me their writing, show me whatever else they had, was very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's one of the things. The other thing that I really kind of learned was just the need for, I guess, update myself, and like I don't, like, how do I put it, like update myself in like the technological world and like what is going on, I guess.
Yeah.
Because it's definitely, it wasn't as, I guess it wasn't as hard for me as for other people, but at the same time, it just, this was one of those things that happened. And what if something else would happen? Do I have the skills necessary to be able to communicate with other people and remain safe at the same time?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, good point.
just I think the learning outcome was really, I learned a lot.
And it sounds like you're still learning too. Or you froze a little bit.
Basically, yeah.
There you go.
So how about you, Marshall? What silver linings have you found, if any?
Well, it's kind of like a double-edged sword with my silver lining. I got a lot of stress relief after having a lot of stress involving time. Because this, basically all of my research should have been done last semester and could have been done in like a month's time frame, because I could have been in the shop every day working. But now at this point, I'm actually extending into the summer to finish it up. So instead of worrying about getting everything done in a very quick manner this semester, I got that stress relief like 2 weeks ago when I was told that you probably shouldn't defend this semester, you should defend over the summer instead. And even though I didn't want to do that, now I can take my time more and relax and slow down.
You could also then, that's interesting too. That's one of the big. I can relate to that. I'm working on international projects that that time has been suspended, and while that's really frustrating, it's also given me a lot of time to kind of but to go back in and reevaluate. Like, oh, this kind of went wrong, or what does this really mean? So I could see that a byproduct of time, is essential, and especially all of us involved in projects that require outcome and research, and time, obviously time's a factor, but that was pretty interesting. Thinking about so you've had this extra time. You're working on these projects. Some of the outcomes have yet to, or maybe some of the final outcome, which you thought what was going to happen, and it didn't, and for various reasons, or it's still in process. But I would just like to know, like, what nugget in there of your work and your individual project research, collaborative research, what is the coolest aspect? What is the coolest aspect of this research that you're doing? There's the obvious things, and it could be something obvious, but it could be something maybe more personal or more global. But I'm just curious about your thoughts about what is this core reoccurring interest in why you're doing this?
Well, one of the things that happens with a lot of engineering research projects is you have to machine something or send something off to get machined, and I just love that process. And as much as I hate to say that the test fixture has been changed several times and we've had to do a lot of different things to it, it's given me a lot of experience in different things like welding, grinding, lathe work on the mill, all the things that I normally don't get to do. I actually have to put my hands in and work with other people on, and that was pretty entertaining.
Yeah. That's awesome.
That's my favorite part.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, it has kind of been part of that component of time, and that things take as much time as they require, and to allow that to be, and to just take the time. We all have a tendency to say, okay, this is my deadline and this is when I, because we got to get things done. And also sometimes the ideas that we're working on require more time than that sometimes we allot for them. And so for me, it's been to really just be okay when time is longer than I want it to be. And also the, kind of realization that this is at the heart of what I want to be doing. And so it's like finding that like pin, you're like, okay, now I can define that this is something that is essential in my work. Yeah.
Yeah, like time, time's always nice to have. It's always a good thing to, just kind of be in spec of, I guess for me though, it was just kind of the thing I enjoyed that I'm like starting to like the most is coding. Coding in like just different languages. Before I don't know if there's this program called MATLAB, which was, just kind of matrix math. So that's the only thing I knew how to do. Now, I've learned Python, and then, I'm hoping to learn more languages as I go. And I think that, like, I guess like this project has shown me a little more about the career I want and like what I want to do later on in life. So it's just, I guess that's one of the nice things that like just kind of keeps me going, because it's so fascinating how much I can do with just, writing a few words a certain way on a computer, and the program just kind of executing it, and then you're like, wow, this works. And so that's always nice to have. I think that like that's kind of like what keeps me going and trying to learn more about it. So that's the one little thing that I guess like my project that really just kind of brings it all together and really makes me want to keep going with it.
Those are good nuggets. Coding, making, engagement, they're all good nuggets. I was thinking that since the two of you are in the in the engineering program, it might be, and we're talking about time, it'd be really probably interesting to make a time machine.
And
Hey!
Get a lot done. I have this right now. Make a pact that we work on a time machine.
Yeah.
And then we become like rulers of the universe.
Or ruiners of it. Either way, or ruiners of it. You don't know.
If I'm involved, it'll be a ruiner. No, I think it's really cool. Again, I keep seeing these things come up. There's there's interest in this idea of things that are linear, like the pursuit of putting something together logically, and then the sphere of alinear process of research that is really critical to science, the arts. Tracy's not here. It'd be really interesting to talk to Tracy. What I found really interesting about her video is working with children and actually having the ability to actually engage in her research in real time during COVID with precautions, which were I was thinking about how that would have been an interesting bookend to see where the challenges were when you can actually still work with your subjects, as opposed to limited engagement. Say, Marshall, your lack of being able to get into the studio or in the shop and make things. That would have been an interesting sort of point counterpoint discussion. Maybe sometime we can talk to Tracy about that. I was another thing I was thinking, and then we just kind of let it move on to however. But I was thinking about what each of you thought about. So 5 years out, and the work that you're doing now, and how that might parlay into a real application, this idea of wellness or awareness or well-being. But where do you see this particular research and work that you're doing, and how do you envision that in 5 years, whether you're still involved in it or not? Let's say, for instance, someone comes across some of the work you've done, and you're not there to explain it, but the work is there. And so where do you see yourself, and what do you hope someone will see and get out of and do, and how is it applied, in the future? And so I'll let whoever just jump in and talk about that.
I think particularly in the arts, there is kind of this realization, and that has kind of stemmed from, COVID and not being able to access things like museums and galleries and having, kind of these places where we go to look at, objects of cultural value, is that we have to start looking at how do we move art as a concept into the public realm a little more effectively, so that there's more access. And that, for me, is really what Live Lab is all about, is this idea of public practice and how process is part of the work, and engagement. And so I see that kind of continuing on as like a theoretical approach for making and for makers in the future. And so, kind of the ideas behind what we're working on are that, anyone could come in that has an interest in pursuing this concept and could step in and find a way to use what they're interested in a way that would engage, and provide access to process, and and that just would continue on, because I think that that's going to become a normalizing way in which arts become not only part of what we need to be healthy, happy humans, but also the way in which we make it more equitable, and allowing access. It no longer has this like red velvet rope kind of feel to it. I feel like we need to eliminate that. And so that's, in 5 years, I'd like to be engaging in public process and projects, and also that students would be here, and have the ability to figure out how their work applies in that kind of approach.
Like breaking barriers and making bridges,
Yeah.
to different communities.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Anybody else?
Well, I expect that this research that I'm doing is going to help the next person on this project to know how to control the device that they're working on. Because right now we're working with a MR damper that's already been supplied by a manufacturer. But in the future, I expect that someone's going to make a better version of it specific to this application. And they're going to want to know control algorithms to see if it'll actually work. And if it doesn't work, then they know not to go down this route. But if it does work, then they might explore it a little bit further and implement this control in their new design for an actual device. That's what I hope would happen.
In 5 years, do you see yourself mountain biking?
Probably not. I'd give it a try, but
Just curious. Yeah.
Can be dangerous sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Buffalo.
No, I mean, for me, I in the next 5 years, I hope that this project, really becomes something that is, has been tested on somebody with muscle weakness, somebody who, has a problem with their gait cycle and can use this device to, improve it. And that way, maybe a little more research can be done, or, somebody else might get interested in it. And, this could be potentially something that leads to, a big, biomedical project that does help, people with disabilities in the lower limb area. Because I know, there's a lot of companies out there that are trying to do work with, um, people who can't walk, just kind of trying to make sure that create, robotic legs that can help and aid somebody, to walk that, weren't able to walk before, or they were able to walk before and something happened. So I think that next 5 years, I hope we reach somewhere where, this idea really shows that it can really work. And then from there we can, go on to whatever the next step is to, just improve it, or, put it out in a market, or put it out somewhere where, people would be able to get benefited from this. I suppose me, I'm not sure where I would be. I would hope I would hope I keep track of where this project is going. I am hoping to eventually, become something in the biomedical field, um, engineering, or, maybe just something around that area. But I definitely think that this project has a lot of. I think that all of our projects really have, a lot of room to grow. I think that they're pretty. How do you put, like, pretty young, so that, there's a lot of. They're just an idea right now, a concept. But if we manage to, make it better for the next person that's going to take over, or just in general, something that can flourish into a better thing, then I think the community would be better for it. For me in the biomedical community, for Jen, and, just the community in general, and then for Marshall, um, and then mountain biking community, on the mountain biking, yeah, community, and then whoever else needs it, So.
Cadillac of mountain bikes.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll take one of those.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. You're right, Pablo. There is, there's the, the more you talk, the more we discuss from different fields, the more you can start to see, connections.
Yeah.
It's interesting sometimes that the most obvious thing is just laying there, undiscovered until a conversation like this happens, where all of a sudden you go, oh yeah, of course, So, and I think that's the beauty. That's the beauty of doing things like this. It's also the beauty of doing work like you're doing, and also the beauty of hosting events like this, Jan. Like where you can just see it, right? And it reminds me of like the three really important things I think that you have to do as a creative, or where you're investigating, or whether you're teaching, or you have to know You have to know your history, you have to know your stuff. You have to know what kind of questions were people asking, in the past, so you know how to stand on their shoulders. And then what kinds of questions are people asking now? And then once you have that framework, then you put yourself in a position to ask yourself the question, how do I make a contribution?
Yeah.
And what I'm seeing and hearing is that there's that contribution part is the question. You're doing the research to find, the information from the past and current, and then where's the contribution, and hopefully that contribution will just kind of roll on and benefit the human condition and our own curiosities and also those cool nuggets of things that are important to us, like being in a shop, grinding and welding, or like coding, or just going out in the public and asking people questions,
Yeah.
And being speculative, and I see that, this has been really cool, and I also wish that Tracy was here, because I would love to talk to her about STEM and STEAM.
Yes.
And I think A should always be in the STEM equation, because without it, there's, it's part of the investigation. Another
Agreed.
time.
No, that's.
But if I'm just curious, did any of you have any burning question for one another, or something you want to say? And we can just sort of, we can kind of wrap things up, I would imagine.
I don't know.
Well, Tom, as the host, my role here was just to pretty much listen and make sure everything's recorded. But as a coordinator, working with Dr. Joy Bowers-Campbell on this event, last year when we canceled the event and they talked about this year it would be a virtual event, I said, oh no, we'll be over this. We'll have it back to normal next year. And so I just want to give a call out to everybody, all of the researchers who were able to pivot to this new format for us to really put on a meaningful event in this environment. And, I've watched everybody's videos, looked at everybody's posters. I even read most of the research papers. The quality of research that's going on by our graduate students is simply amazing. So as somebody who's winding down their career, I can tell you I have much hope for the future. I just want to thank you all for your ability to pivot and move into this new format and really create a different but a very meaningful event. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Gina.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I think, but just to follow up, creating this format and what y'all are doing in the graduate school is really creating a vehicle for things like this. And I agree. Last year, I thought, well, we'll be back to face-to-face. Forget it. That's why we need that time machine. So guys,
Yeah.
get on it.
Right.
Yeah, time's wasting. Well, great. I guess, and I hope everybody has an umbrella.
Yeah, right.
I think so, yeah.
If nobody has any other burning questions, I'd just like, again, applaud each of your research, and it was super interesting. Just the diverse delivery systems, and just what you're doing. It's really, really cool to see.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great work, everyone.
I guess,
Yeah.
I just want to say, I guess, from a different perspective, I didn't really know what I was going into, because I was like, okay, well, we have, I know Marshall personally. Then I was like, I saw the project presentation. I was like, I guess they're related, but you never really think about it until you bring other people's points into it, that how much correlation there is between everything, with us, Marshall and I, doing certain projects, and reaching out to the community and trying to be more creative in certain ways, and then Tracy herself with her research, trying to get kids to start thinking about STEM in general, or whatever that you think about, and learn more about things.
Yeah.
which, just kind of leads into, I think, a better, bright future. So, but thank you for having this event on for me,
Yeah.
from my perspective. Yeah, it was really good. It was nice to have.
Yeah.
And I'll also like to thank, if this is being recorded and going to be watched by the faculty mentors, I'd like to thank each of the faculty mentors. I know most.
Thanks, Morgan.
And it's just really, really interesting to, I know some or most of them, and it's nice to see what their students and their, folks are doing in their respective
Yeah.
departments. So that was really enlightening.
Yes.
Cool. Well,
Thank you very much.
Thank
for the
you,
opportunity,
everybody.
and
Thank
thanks for
you.
pushing, Tom. Thanks for pushing.
that's my job.
Yep.
Thank you, Jan.
You're welcome.
All right.
My pleasure. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a great day.